Hello everybody, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like my videos. Um, since even before I started a YouTube channel, people have asked me, and I have talked at community centers and other places about the Philippines and Filipino history. And in the early 80s, when I was stationed in the Philippines, I took a class from the University of the Philippines called The History of the Filipino People. In the early 80s, it was accurate. Most of it, a lot of it's still accurate to this day, but because of technology, ancient skeletons, the whole DNA thing really kind of redefined who the Filipino people actually are. And now it's starting to look, as I understand the whole situation, it might be a history that goes back 70 or 75,000 years to ancient humanoid people, I'll say, being there in the Philippines. And like a lot of the other countries, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Australia, and even Tasmania. But it's a true ancient melting pot, because they also had Arabs that was in the southern Philippines. That's why there are Muslims on the island of Mindanao, for instance, and East Asians that came probably via Taiwan. But when you use the term who the Filipino people are, that's got to be kept in context. And ancient governments look a lot different. The native language that's spoken on the island of Iloilo, people now think may be the oldest continuously spoken language on the planet. And because it's much older than Tagalog, for instance, or Cebuano. But what a lot of people wanted me to talk about was the history involving the Americans, the U.S. being involved with the Philippines. Our basic involvement as far as the U.S. goes is during the Spanish-American War. Basically the U.S. took like Puerto Rico and Panama and the Philippines, and I think even Cuba at that point. That was in 1898. So our involvement with the Philippines goes back a long way. And we had U.S. troops there at famous places like Fort Stotzenberg, which eventually became Clark Air Base, the biggest base that the United States Air Force had in terms of square miles. When I was over there, going across the center in a straight line, it used to be referred to as 25-mile America. We also had Subic Bay with QB Point, Wallace Air Station, Crow Valley Bombing Range, and a resort up in the city of Baguio in the mountains. But we had people there, and we had a famous governor general running the Philippines called Arthur MacArthur. General, 4-star Arthur MacArthur was the governor general of the Philippines. And yes, Arthur MacArthur was Douglas MacArthur's father, and Douglas MacArthur had giant roots in the Philippines. His father, and later him, owned original owners of the San Miguel beer brewery. The San Miguel Corporation was established by Arthur MacArthur. A lot of people don't know that, but that's the truth. And at one point in time, just at Clark Air Base, there was 60,000 American souls living on that base. So yeah, it was a big installation. Those bases in the Philippines were really, really important due to their location to the United States and Southeast Asia, which we don't have today. We cannot project power in Southeast Asia like we used to, because we don't have the people there, the troops there to do it. And our troops were still there when the Japanese invaded and took the Philippines in 1942. And in 44, the retaking of islands in the Philippines actually started, with that being completed in early 45. One friend of mine, I think, said his grandfather or great-grandfather, I'm not sure which, he has a picture of him standing in a Marine uniform someplace down around Manila, which obviously that could be because we had taken the Philippines in 1898. And at that time, early on, the largest numbers of the United States Army and Marines in the Philippines were at fairly small installations down around the Manila area. So yeah, I can believe that he was there and looking at the picture. As the time frame's probably about right. And he was a Marine, stationed around Manila in, I think, around 1901. So that would definitely be possible, and at that time frame, most of the troops would have been down around Manila. Fort Stotsenburg, like I said, that became Clark Air Base, was later on that they took that. And then Jimmy Carter, the brilliant wizard that he was, gave like the Panama Canal and the Philippines back. And then suddenly we were having to pay rent, exorbitant rent, even back in the early 80s, on the bases that we had in the Philippines. So because of that fact, we were looking to get out because we were paying a bunch of money. And then Mount Pinatubo blew up, kind of in between Clark and Subic, and that gave the U.S. a reason to just close the bases and leave, which we did in short order. And that left a vacuum that the Chinese are now filling. Now the United States gave the Philippines back to the Filipinos on July 4th, 1946, and they were running their own country, even though we still had a couple of bases still there. But they don't celebrate Independence Day on July 4th. They actually celebrate it when they had